Chapter 7, From the Heart. I don't know what's going on with me. I feel like I can't take it much more. Nagato, first-person view. It was another day for me. The second day of my permanent stay in Konoha. This was so confusing. Of all of the people I could have ended up being around, what was I thinking for allowing my guard to fall so low? This village despises my very existence, and yet I am living in it. I knew this would happen, if I ever let it get this far. That's why I didn't join Naruto in his original offer in the first place. But, somehow I am here. It was almost as if fate was actually playing with us all like puppets on strings. Was there a purpose? I got up and started a slow pace through the forest, not really thinking where I was going. I just wanted to be alone. Just being around Konoha sent shivers down my spine. The tears kept coming and coming, but it was hopeless to even try to stop them. Every attempt to seize and desist these forsaken tears only let them flow even more. I'm crying, but I don't even know why. Konoha. Just thinking about this place makes me dizzy. It's like I am their property. What was my reason for staying? Why did I bother to even train that simple-minded boy? He's so naive with his ideals. What makes him think that he can save the world? It made me angrier the more I thought about it. Why did I trust in him? How can Nagato put so much trust in this boy, who can't even do a fraction of what he could do? Everything about him is just so annoying. Even last night, when he treated me to ramen, he didn't even bother to use manners. What was he, 4 years old? Even Jiraiya-sensei had proper etiquette while he ate, while not much for anything else. He just gets under my skin. Clearly Nagato was not in his right state of mind when he thought this would work, placing that chakra rod fragment into Naruto like that. Whatever his thoughts were, I highly doubt they were rational. I continued walking through the forest, replaying my thoughts over and over again. It was a cacophony of noise that wouldn't go away. Why stay here and help him? He is the enemy. Why do you trust him? Why did Nagato end his life for this boy's benefit? I don't know why. Everything about this seems wrong. Is Naruto really the child of prophecy? Even I couldn't figure out exactly what makes Naruto a little different from the rest. He's so childish. And that smile, that was when I stopped my train of thought. His smile was different. That warmness it created. It seemed like his smile could brighten the whole entire village and leave a glow for days. For some reason, every time I am around him, it is as though I don't have as much to worry about. Can I honestly feel that way about someone who seems to know nothing? He's so young. In first person, Konan turned her head and saw a silver-haired, mask-bearing Jonin walking right behind her. His expression was neutral, but you could feel a knowing vibe radiating off of him. Is there something I can help you with, Kakashi? Not really, Kakashi replied firmly. I am just watching you to make sure you don't do anything rash. She smiled sadly, followed by a light scoff. Tis. It's not like I could leave, if I wanted to. I would be dead before I even get halfway out of this place. True, he replied with acceptance, but I doubt Naruto would allow that to happen. What do you mean? That gained her interest rather quickly. Right, believe it or not, he already sees you as a comrade. He doesn't let his friends die so easily, the silver-haired man responded, while gazing into the sky. Her eyes widened slightly from what she just heard. Comrade? Yes, in his eyes, you are already his friend, Kakashi came back, as if answering her unvoiced question, and although I don't totally agree with your residence, it's not really my decision either. Konan didn't have any retort to that statement. It only left her to ponder more on the reasons she survived that fight with Madara. If Naruto wasn't there to come in and save her the way he did, she would have died and hit the final nail in the Akatsuki trio's coffin. Naruto was there, almost as if he already knew, but she knew her friend Nagato had something to do with that. He came just in time to save her, and basically gave her a second chance. Her eyes widened slightly once she thought about something. It was something that she didn't think about earlier, and would keep the new question for later. Naruto is a strange character, Kakashi, the blue-haired woman replied bluntly, while staring at the ground. The man's sweat dropped at her statement, while closing his eye, and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, he gets that a lot. But, the male Jonin continued, while opening his eye again, it's just the way he is. Everything he does influences everybody. He has a strange way of getting into everyone's heart. Konan couldn't help but feel a little truth coming from that statement. She thought about how Nagato changed after hearing Naruto's explanations in the hollowed paper tree. I can see that from the way the villagers view him. It's almost as if everyone depends on him. Well, you can say that, Kakashi replied in a slightly resigned voice. He's like beacon of hope that gives everyone confidence, not only in themselves, but with the entire village as well. Maybe that's what keeps me around him, she thought while looking around into the trees. I did say that he gave everyone hope. Did I think I was an exception? Her thoughts went back to her fight with Tobi Madara again during the time she spoke so confidently about Naruto's light. I know. He gave me hope as well, the blue-haired leaf nin replied solemnly, while looking over her shoulder. She started taking a few more steps toward the leaf village, while wiping her eyes, and don't worry about me. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. Not because I have no choice, but because I have a duty to fulfill. He is the child of prophecy after all. She then paced alone back into the village, leaving Kakashi to himself. Once he was alone, he started quietly thinking, the village isn't the only thing that Naruto seems to be getting to. After that was said, a slight smile crossed his face. Maybe she isn't all bad. Later, whispers came from all directions as a woman walked through the village in rubble. Things were sort of a mixed match of buildings and debris as people were busily working, trying to fix their old lives that they cherished. It didn't take long before people realized who was walking beside them, and they immediately dispersed, trying to get away from her. Most people who already knew who she was just ignored the woman and pretended like she wasn't there, as if she were a part of the background that held no significance. She didn't care though. Obviously she wanted to tell them off, but trying to talk to people who were living in their own world was kind of hard to achieve. You can't tell anyone something if they were too blind to take things into consideration. What was the point? They would only ignore her or talk over her, which was something common to people who wouldn't understand what she had to go through. She was currently brooding at the moment, which was something that was becoming a habit for her. She wasn't just in thought, because now she fell back into her anger phase again. It seemed as though what Kakashi said didn't really stick with her very long, because she was already thinking that Naruto knew nothing of her. She layered herself with more denial at the boy and what he can achieve, although earlier she said herself that she believed that Naruto is the prophetic child and that he gave everyone hope. Her random mood swings were getting more severe the longer she stayed around here. While the woman was in her thoughts, an Anbu member poofed randomly in front of her. It didn't scare her, although it did make her flinch, because she was deep in thought beforehand. The Anbu stood only for a second before he ordered, "Follow me." Knowing she wouldn't be able to decline, she nodded her head silently and let him lead the way. After following the Anbu for several minutes, they came across another end of the village. It had a lot less people in it who were busily building houses and frames for support. People were painting, lining electricity, creating plumbing systems, fixing roofs, and whatever other mundane tasks that were required to build housing. You could also see a small group of children playing off to themselves across the street from where the buildings were being built. 2 were girls, while the other 2 were boys, and each child looked no older than 5 years old. The sight of the children playing and enjoying themselves almost brought a smile to her face. "Almost, all right," the cloaked figure replied to the blue-haired woman, snapping her attention away from the children. "Your task is to help these people in whatever they require your assistance for. You will continue working until they stop working." The Anbu was replying in an authoritative tone, signifying it wasn't a request but a command. She only nodded her head again and looked unamused at her surroundings until a voice broke through the air. "So, is this our help that was sent to us by the Hokage?" An older man, roughly in his 50s or 60s with small rectangular glasses whose hair was graying on his head and goatee from age, came up while grasping a hammer in his hand and laying it on his shoulder. "Yes, Tazuna-san, this Kunoichi will be aiding you with your work for today." Good, the elder man replied, while rubbing his chin. "She will do just fine. All I needed was one person, and it looks like I can now settle my worry." The Anbu looked at the new Jonin once more, before he disappeared by Shunshin, leaving Konin with the elder man. He gave her a once-over and smiled, before he wiped his forehead with his arm. "Well, grab some tools, and let's get down to it, shall we?" She only nodded her head with an emotionless mask across her face, took the tools that were lying around, and began doing whatever Tazuna asked of her. Later, it was around 3 o'clock, the hottest part of the day. Konin had been helping basically all day, and was seeing the effect on herself. She was sweating profusely and always asking for water more often than necessary, but she never did complain or bother about anything else other than being dehydrated. It was more or less like she was on autopilot and just doing the labor like a machine. Numb to life in her surroundings, and only did what she was told. Sometimes she would also mumble something to herself, but it was always too low to make out whenever she did say something, so it was ignored. Tazuna began to watch the woman as she slowly descended into an even more robotic state, if that were possible, and began to question it. He may be old, but he knew that something was troubling the young woman and keeping her from giving her all to the project. She was a leaf ninja. She should be more willing than even the foreign builders around here. She began to raise another structure beam for the second story of a house, making sure it was perfectly straight and at the location it was needed. When she went to grab nails and the hammer to put it in place, the beam began to lose balance and started tilting in the direction of other beams that were currently unattached because other workers were busy with those beams about to nail their own. "Hey, you shouldn't leave the beam unattended, it might hurt somebody," a grisly voice said to Conan as she looked over and saw the same gray-haired man she met earlier holding the beam with his two hands with a smile. Her eyes widened a little, but she regained her mask, not wanting to really talk to the man. "Sorry," she replied with blank eyes, while taking the wood from his hand and placing it back where it was before. The man looked at her for a moment, but started working beside the woman, trying to keep a steady pace with himself. After watching her continue with her mechanical behavior, he decided that now was the time to speak up. "Look, I know it's not really my business, but I am just curious to know if you are all right." "Yes," she replied blankly and hastily to him, not really veering her eyesight from the work she was doing. Tazuna cited her quick remark, "Look, I've seen a lot of people do the same thing, so I know when you say you're fine, you're not really fine." "You are right," the blue-haired woman responded to him calmly, still busily working on another support board. Tazuna widened his eyes at the sudden agreement she replied to him. "So, there really was, you were right about it not being your business," she retorted to him, making his face turn slightly sour. After his face turned sour though, he changed it to acknowledgement as he thought to himself. "It seems as though she doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe I can get." He began to raise another beam as he started talking. "You know, I had a friend, no, a son who died as a hero amongst our village." Conan continued working, as if she wasn't listening, so Tazuna continued, "But a thug took control of our village and made it seem like my son was a criminal for doing heroic deeds. That evil man took my son and executed him in the town square." He paused slightly at the memory and closed his eyes, while a sigh escaped his lips. Of course, it left the whole town in shock, not only for the execution, but for the fact that he was a hero amongst them that fell at the hands of this evil man. Needless to say, the whole town lost hope, and I fell into a depression along with my daughter and grandson. We all lost hope. Conan stopped, but for only a second once he realized that she was listening, and continued what she was doing. "The entire town and I decided that we needed a bridge so we could get supplies a lot faster and have a booming economy. After our hero fell out, our village took a turn for the worst, and we lost all trades coming into the village. It was mainly due to the evil man that controlled our land." He then shifted his eyesight to the beam and began hammering. "While we were working on the bridge, however, the evil man began killing off the bridge builders and endangering all of the rest that were alive because he felt this bridge was a threat to his services, which it was." He picked up another nail and began hammering it into the beam. "We were in a bind and not really knowing what else to do, so we decided to hire a group of leaf ninja to protect us until we finished the bridge. But morale was falling between the bridge builders, so most of them quit. Since I was the leader of the bridge builders, I had a duty to my village and my family to build that bridge." He lowered his eyes, "So I never gave up, and I tried my hardest to finish as fast as I could. It wasn't until a scuffle with a missing mist ninja that I thought it was the end of me. He was hired by the evil man to kill me and the rest of the bridge builders so that we couldn't finish." Tazuna began pounding with the hammer again, trying to keep his body occupied and to relinquish some of that mental stress. "While the ninja I paid for assisted me, I met the mist ninja for the first time. He was a very cruel man when I met him. He was out to get me, and I knew it when I saw him. The ninja I hired protected me and defeated the man." The blue-haired woman stopped hammering and continued listening. She was actually listening to his story, although she also figured that it wouldn't help to try and stop him. Not only that, but she didn't want for him to stop, which was odd to her. Noticing discreetly that she was actually paying attention to him, he played a smirk on his face and continued, "I was escorted to my home and began building on the bridge. The ninja watched over me and the other builders while we worked, but," he stopped a second for added effect, "that same mist ninja came back and tried to attack again. Those ninja fought their best to defeat him, and his teammate that helped him. Unknowing to us, the evil drug lord decided to ambush us all during the fight and thought he could outnumber us to win." Tazuna picked up a beam and put it in place. That mist ninja then realized that he no longer had to kill me and went after the thug and mini army he created and ended the evil man's life. He turned and gave her a grin, causing her to immediately turn her head and continue her building, as if she was never paying attention to him in the first place. Needless to say, we were able to finish the bridge and gain a prospering village again. That statement caused the man to heartily laugh out loud. Others looked at him with a grin, probably workers from the village he came from, but only for a moment, before continuing on their tasks. "I was so grateful to the ninja that helped me that I even named the bridge after one of them." His laugh then died down, and he put on a confident look. The one I named it after was the one that gave me and my family the courage and hope to move on, continue with our lives, and never give up. When I first met him, I thought he was just another brat who didn't give a damn about anything but himself. But once I realized that he never gave up on his word and was even the one that wanted to ensure my safety the most, I changed my mind about him. A thankful smile appeared while he said the next few words. He looked over to Conan, who had forgotten that she was even looking at him, and said, "He gained my respect." The boy was very strong and selfless. Something that the entire village of mine needed for a while. In our village's eyes, he is pronounced a hero. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, the blue-haired woman replied barely over a whisper. Tazuna gave her a surprised look as it quickly turned into a smile. "Oh, so you know him?" Conan's eyes widened slightly at the man's sudden answer. Naruto was a round of laughter from a group of children kept her from finishing her thoughts. After hearing the children, Tazuna noticed them and walked over to the edge of the building from the second floor to see the little kids from earlier. They were playing around and on top of a building that was still in shambles, right next door to the building they were fixing. The one next door looked close to collapsing on itself, and they were playing like it was no big deal. With a great shout and a hand to his mouth to enhance the sound, the man yelled to them, "Hello, young children. I'm sorry, but you can't play in the buildings. Please move into the street. That house is dangerous." Conan couldn't hear the children too well, but she could make out something that sounded like a yes sir and a shuffling of feet. Tazuna walked back over to Conan and gave her a smile. "Sorry about that. So as I was saying, you really bam. Boom. Bam." A giant sound erupted from the building next door as it began to crumble and fall to the ground. All 3 stories of it. The workers all huddled to the edges of the second story to get a good glimpse at what happened, even though they missed most of it and just saw the ending where smoke plumed into the air. Tazuna looked at it for a moment and breathed a sigh of relief before walking back over to the blue-haired woman's direction. "Well, at least the children got out of it before. Ahhh. Mio-chan." Tazuna's face went morbid as he rushed back to the edge of the project. He looked over and saw 3 kids huddled together in shock. If he remembered correctly, there were 4 children instead of 3. A girl was missing from the group. A little girl is trapped inside the building. "What?" a male worker shouted as he looked over. He noticed the building in its state as his face went serious. "We have to get her out of there." "All right everyone, follow up." Tazuna stopped once he saw Conan dash through the beams and jump. She offered almost no patience for the rest of the builders as she turned into hundreds of papers and flew to the crumbled mess that was once a home. Once she reached the building, she formed back into herself from her waist up and asked the children, "Where was she when you last saw her?" They were too scared to speak, so they pointed into the collapsed area in the same direction. Conan narrowed her eyes and dispersed herself into hundreds of papers again, and flowing herself through the entire building, going through all of the nooks and crannies that the building had to offer. After about 10 or 15 seconds, one of the papers attached itself to a human figure huddled into a corner of the building, lightly sobbing to herself. All of the rest of the paper came to the one piece that found the girl and slowly formed itself into Conan again. After 10 seconds or so, Conan was kneeling down next to the girl looking at her feeble figure. The space was a tight squeeze, but had enough room to fit another person in it before it became uncomfortable. "Are you all right?" the Jonin asked the little brown-haired girl. The girl lifted her head up to reveal watery green eyes and lightly nodded her head. Conan stared at the girl and thought, "Good, at least she's uninjured." "All right, I am going to get help get you out of here." "I'll be right back," the woman replied to the feeble girl. As soon as Conan got up to leave, the little girl grabbed the Jonin's sleeve tightly and started crying onto the woman. "Please, don't leave me alone. I'm scared." Conan felt a pang in her chest. It was an unusual feeling, but it was a feeling that gave her a forlorn look on her face. She couldn't place her finger on it, but the feeling was something familiar. After brooding for a moment, she began to speak in a gentle tone. "Don't worry, I will protect you and get you out of here safely. I promise." When she said those words, she put on a slight smile that made the girl stop crying almost instantaneously. She tried once more to get up, only to have the little girl grip on her sleeve even tighter than before. Another grief-stricken look appeared on the Jonin's face as she stared back down at the girl. "Don't go. Please stay with me." That statement caused her to hesitate. Should she really leave a child in here alone? It would only be a moment before Conan was back. But what if something happened to the little girl while she was outside relaying the information of the young girl's condition? After another moment, Conan created a paper clone of herself that then dispersed through the rubble to tell the other workers of the child's location and the damage. After about 5 minutes or so, the workers finally pulled the shambles apart to reveal a quiet Conan with a female child cuddling beside her. Many of the workers' faces lit up upon seeing the young girl was safe. When Conan pulled herself out of the building with the girl cradled in her arms, Tizuna put on a relieved grin. I checked her for any problems, and she is fine, the blue-haired woman replied to Tizuna and the rest of the workers. That's good, Tizuna responded with a sigh. Anyone else in there? No. It was just the girl and I, Conan retorted rather tiredly. Tizuna looked at the girl cradled in the Jonin's arms and grew a warm smile at the picture. So, the woman does have a heart after all, he thought quietly watching the scene before him. Miyo-chan. My precious daughter, where are you? Mommy. The girl yelped happily in the direction of her mother's voice. Pushing through the crowd of people that gathered at the site was a woman with long brown hair and dark pine green eyes. Oh Miyo-chan, there you are. The woman came up to her daughter and almost teared up at the revelations of the young girl's cuts and bruises. The girl ripped herself from Conan's arms and ran to her mother with a wide smile on her face. The mother saw her daughter and opened her arms to allow the little girl to jump in them freely. Once a few tears were shed from the couple, the girl burst with excitement and pointed at Conan. Mommy, mommy. That woman saved me. Oh really? The woman answered with an exaggerated smile. She then cast her gaze upwards and soon found a lock of eyesight with the blue-haired woman. A slight frown began to form on Conan's features once he saw the girl's mother produce a scowl emanating a disgusted pressure. Mommy, are you all right? The girl asked her mom, who quickly shed her disgust and put on a warm front, as if her actions earlier never happened. Of course dear, I am fine now that you're safe, she replied cheerily, while snuggling her nose to her daughter's hair. She nuzzled back and forth a few times until a slight rub across something foreign caught the woman's interest as she opened her eyes. Miyoko, what is this? The girl's grin spread even wider. Oh, that nice woman gave it to me. Isn't it pretty? The mother looked in the young child's hair and saw a white origami flower wrapped into her hair in a similar style that Conan used herself. A light frown appeared on the woman's face as she peered over to the Jonin that saved her daughter's life. A fraction of a second later, the mother pulled the flower from the girl's hair and tossed it on the ground, but not without a tempered tantrum from the little one held in her hands. Mommy, what are you doing? That was mine, and that nice lady gave it to me. Enough. I will hear no more of this. We are going home, the woman sneered, while she began taking steps away from the buildings. Hey, wait a minute. Aren't you going to give a ninja a thank you or something? Tizuna asked while raising one of his hands in the air, as if he was trying to flag her down. The mother stopped in her tracks as she turned her head and gave a look that could kill, as if I would ever be grateful to someone like her. She then continued walking, leaving the builders to glare at her with revulsion. After another moment slipped by, the gray-haired man changed his face into one of disapproval. What a hateful woman, Tizuna responded while sauntering himself over to the blue-haired Jonin, heaving a sigh. While he did so, people have certainly changed nowadays. Conan didn't say anything. There was nothing to say, really. The woman knew who she was and treated her as if she were nothing more than a common rat. A sorrowful face took hold as the Jonin silently walked over to the lone origami flower that was thrown on the ground and gently picked it up with an uneasy hand. Staring into the flower, she fell back into her thinking phase and tried to swallow it up. But the longer she dwelled on it, the harder it was to stifle her emotional cracks. A few moments passed before Tizuna walked over to Conan and put a hand on her shoulder. Are you all right? The gray-haired man asked with concern, trying to get a view of her face. Conan took the flower from her hand and gently let it fall apart in her grasp before she turned her face to view the worried man. I'm fine, she then put on her emotionless face and tried hard not to cry as she started walking toward the half-built building. When she turned her body to walk, however, Tizuna could have sworn that he saw a tear fall from her eye. She had to get out of here, this village, because if she didn't soon, she would probably go mad. Later, it was 9:30 at night, and there was still no sign of Conan. Naruto had gone through several ramen cups in his apartment just to try and stop his anxiousness. He tried to tell himself that it wasn't anything spectacular, that it was just because she had to work a little late than normal. It was his constant jitters that confused him, but all the same made him worry even more. Could she have been ambushed? No, she is much stronger than that. But she did say that she wasn't going to put up a fight if she did get jumped by someone, didn't she? She didn't say that she wasn't going to defend herself though. Plus, the Hokage told the villagers that they couldn't mess with her. After running those thoughts through his head, his worrisome feelings left him for the time being. He had his typical orange ninja gear folded and put into a drawer as he felt more comfortable getting into something more house appropriate. He put on some cargo shorts and a black shirt that had an imitation of the Uzumaki swirl on the front. The swirl was colored orange as the boys' cargo shorts were a paste color. The blonde ripped the packaging of another ramen cup and began pouring water into it. After he finished that, he turned off the faucet and went over to the microwave to place his ramen cup on the turntable. He then closed the door with a click and pressed the 3 on the microwave, which beeped and started cooking the ramen, counting down from 3 minutes. He sighed to himself at the unarrival of the blue-haired woman. Why was he so stressed out over this? He didn't even know her that well. He paced over to the couch and plopped himself onto the cushion in a tired manner. Was he really tired? He didn't do much today, but he felt as if the life had been drained from him. He looked out into the dimly lit street from his giant window and saw a person or two walk past his house now and then. The people in his village have softened to the idea of him being around. He remembered back to the time where no one ever came down his street unless it was absolutely necessary, but they would move rather hastily to avoid contact with the supposed demon that they feared. Now when he sees people outside, it is as though the people are comfortable and even almost happy that they are walking down his street. A total mirror opposite of what was normal to Naruto back in the day. He looked over at the new bouquet placed on the windowsill that was left to him the night before. After Conan remembered the others, turned to Ash and pondered her safety again. His gaze stared into the flowers in a spacey manner as he reminisced about the times when he was still a preteen. Things were so much simpler then. He didn't have to worry about anyone specifically after him. He didn't have to worry about doing anything he didn't want to do. It was just him and Team 7 doing missions and enjoying each other's company. Even though things were far from perfect, they were happy times. Now it's as though things took a turn for the worst. Sasuke, a member of Team 7, defected from the Leaf. Kakashi already died once, and the Akatsuki came after the Jinchuriki and hunted him down, all because that Madara guy was in control the entire time. Flashback, Naruto shook his head as his Rinnegan faded into his normal ocean blue eyes. They still felt like they were pulsating, but it was slowly fading away through time. Nagato watched the boy as he compassed himself and gained proper footing. After obtaining this kind of new power so quickly, the redhead knew that it took a little time to adjust. Naruto, he called, gaining the interest of the blonde. The Jinchuriki blinked a few times and looked upon the crippled man who had seriousness in his eyes, which was totally the opposite from a moment ago. There is a man that you have to look out for. He is the one behind everything. The collection of Biju and every other mission that was completed throughout Akatsuki was actually under authority of this man. His power is great, and he is a terrible threat to yours and Jiraiya-sama's vision of peace. Naruto didn't know what to say to that. He always thought Pain was the one behind it all, but it was this other man that the blonde didn't know. The boy grit his teeth, but continued to listen. He used me as a tool, and used my pain and inner turmoil as a catalyst for his diabolical plan of world domination. I didn't know it right off the bat, but I overheard him while I was investigating his character. I didn't trust him the moment I laid my eyes on him, and realized my suspicions were correct once I overheard him talking to another Akatsuki member, the one known as Setsu. Nagato lowered his head in a shameful manner, but while learning his plans, my pain and hatred still overtook me, and I fell oblivious to the outcome of his scheme, if it were to ever come to fruition. I only cared about creating peace through devastation, and thought I could wipe him out whenever I had all of the Jinchuriki. Truth be told, before I ever fought you, the man came to me ordering that it was time to capture you. I had an idea of his plans then, and it made it even worse, because I already knew who you were. It made me hesitant, but I had to comply. In this machine, Nagato threw his eyes to the floor. As much as it aids me, leaves me just as vulnerable, if anyone were to ever attack. I had to act. Nagato, are you telling me that you knew what he was planning the entire time? Conan asked in a concerned voice. Nagato looked over to his teammate and gave her a light nod. That's right, Conan. But why didn't you tell me? I could have. This is exactly why I didn't tell you, the Rinnegan wielder retorted with a calm tone. I knew you would overreact and try to abandon everything that the leader worked for. It would have been foolish, and you would have been killed upon treason. But Nagato, I understand, Conan, but you have to realize that there is a time and place for everything, and that time would have been irrational. I was only trying to protect you. The blue-haired woman had no rebuttal and fell deathly silent as she turned her view away from her friend. Naruto clenched his teeth even harder and began digging his fingers into his palms. Hearing their conversation that was passed between another was almost unbearable. This type of manipulation was unacceptable in his eyes. His own cousin was being used as some human meat puppet to a man that doesn't even appreciate it. Nagato, he growled in a deep tone, no one should ever have to go through something like that. That is why I am telling you all of this, the redhead answered as he took in more shallow breaths. This man needs to be stopped. If he is not, then the world as we know it will perish along with everyone in it. Name, Naruto whispered, causing the redhead to strain his hearing. What? Naruto looked up with an angry glare and spoke once more. His name. What is his name? Nagato raised his head and put on a deathly serious facade. His name is Madara Uchiha. End flashback. Madara Uchiha, the blonde repeated in his mind, while breathing in the apartment's scent that he started to grow accustomed to. That name was engraved into his memory and would never disappear, no matter what happened. The things that man did to his cousin were almost unforgivable and would never fade away as quickly as Uraya's death. Click. Naruto was jolted from his thoughts as he pounced up to witness the source of the sound. His eyes widened once he gained a sight of the person he wanted to see this entire time. Conan was standing in front of the front door with a tired, but mentally tired look as she gazed to the floor. She looked as if she was spending a lot of time in thought, but who could really blame her, right? Naruto peered at her face and mimicked her slight frown that appeared on her features. Are you alright, Conan-chan? The blonde asked cautiously, trying to get a better glimpse of her reaction. She was completely silent and didn't answer Naruto's question or curious gaze. She just stayed in the same spot and looked to the floor, as if something was going on down there. Naruto noticed this and tried to ask her another question to at least release the frozen atmosphere that was placed upon the room once she stepped in. Do you want anything to eat? I can buy you something, if you don't want ramen. Conan clenched her fists tightly, while obscuring her vision in between her blue locks. There was something on the inside that was threatening to burst forth any moment, but the woman was holding it and trying to keep her grasp on it as tightly as she could. Why do you call me that? Call you what? The blonde asked while scratching his head. He was confused of her question, and it left him quite baffled. He didn't remember calling her anything bad, so why did it feel like he was getting his head chewed off? The blue-haired Jonin only became even more irate than before. She gnashed her teeth, trying to hold back the emotion as she slowly stuttered out a sentence. Why do you put Chan at the end of my name? What is this? I can't control my stuttering. What's wrong with me? Naruto saw her face mixed in between sadness and fury, and a tiny hint of confusion. There was something about her that made him feel uneasy, but he should try to cheer her up. Maybe making a smile will change it? He then grew a foxy grin from ear to ear and responded with clarity. I do that to all of my friends. There's that smile again. Why is he smiling? Friends? Her head raised up in a furious rage, her facial features grew sharp with her eyes widening angrily as her tone turned sour. Friends? How are we friends, when you know nothing about me? But, Conan-chan, no, you don't understand shit about me. She pointed her index finger stiffly at him, causing his eyes to widen. You weren't there when my parents were killed when I was only 8 years old. You weren't there when I was forced to look after myself, not knowing when my next meal would be, or where I would lay my head the next night. You weren't there when Jiraiya-sama was training me and my friends. You weren't there when Yuhiko was killed. You weren't even there when I was asking myself if things would get better and they didn't. Naruto's frown deepened as she continued, so don't go saying that you can relate to me when you know nothing about me. She then threw her hands to her head and grabbed it in denial, while closing her eyes. I can't stop myself. What is happening to me? This pain, it wasn't until a week ago that I first met you, so what gives you the right to say that you understand everything that has happened when you obviously don't? I've been through a lot more than you can comprehend. The things I've seen and witnessed will never leave my thoughts for as long as I live. Trust me. Naruto's frown sank even lower as she continued to belittle him. He began to look at his feet in shame and couldn't really say anything to her outburst. What could he say? She was right about the fact that he didn't know anything about her. She lived in an entirely different country than him, and he was thinking that things were similar between him and her. What was the same? I'm sorry, Naruto managed to sputter out after an eerie silence took hold of the apartment. You're sorry? As if your excuse can do anything, she retorted while calming down slightly. No matter what apology you throw at me, it will never help me forget my times in utter hell. Then let me stop the hell from ever coming back. Naruto shouted out loud to the woman, who widened her eyes in surprise. His face saddened a little further before he spoke again. I realize that your life was harder than mine, and I know that I can't erase the pain you've gained through the years. He softened his eyes as he let their sight fall to the floor, slowly clenching and unclenching his hands in the process. But at least I can end it here. Does he honestly think he can just get up and end it now, like it will just go away forever? I can't. I just can't believe him. There's too much. It won't go away. It hurts. How can you end it if you don't even know who I am? Conan was still running on hysterics, but her voice level dropped dramatically. Her face seemed to be turning from anger to sadness. Then teach me who Conan-chan really is. Naruto fumed, making the Jonin freeze with a gasp caught in her throat. Teach me the one that cries at night all alone, while others are enjoying the night spent with their families. Teach me the kunoichi that had to swallow her emotions to live. Teach me the woman that never experienced happiness her entire life and lived as a scared child unsure of what would happen tomorrow. Naruto gazed to the floor, not really looking in any certain area. Although, a second later, a slight upward curve to his lips foreshadowed his continuation. He stared at her once again and spoke loudly, "Let me stop the pain from ever coming back. You won't have to worry about it any longer, because I will prevent anything from getting to you ever again, and that's a promise of a lifetime." Naruto produced a thumb and pointed to himself as he laid his trademark grin upon his face, "And I'll tell you what. If you ever get this low in your life again, and I can't change it, then I will just kill myself. I can guarantee that much because I never go back on my word." Conan gazed at Naruto, lost for words. Everything the blonde said was a lot to take in at once and was hitting it home to the blue-haired woman. She stood there for a second and tried to string a sentence together, although it was proving to be rather difficult since she felt a lump in her throat quickly form, keeping her voice from coming out. Naru was all she could utter at his response to her. Her mind was running in several different directions and didn't know which way was north. Naruto just said he wouldn't let her stoop this low again. He promised her. He looked so determined, that smile. I don't. What is impossible? I can't. Her face slowly started contorting itself, as if it was trying to do something, and Naruto quickly took notice of her altering features. Her face looked like she almost had to sneeze, but he highly doubted that was the case. Trust? It? No, I, alone, Naruto, you. Her face contorted even more as she gnashed her teeth in frustration. She couldn't believe it. Naruto was pulling at her, as if he knew which chord strike in her heart. His sincerity towards her, he used it so flawlessly. It was so warm, so bright. She couldn't explain it. Her whole being was falling apart all because of Naruto's simple words. What was causing it? Was it the way he spoke? Or maybe it was because he was the prophetic one and had the linguistic power. She didn't really know at the moment because she couldn't focus. Her emotions were breaking through, which was something that has never truly surfaced in a long time. Her breathing turned into heaving. Her thoughts were incoherent. She tried to speak, only to have nothing but his name come out. She was in shambles. But something was missing. Naruto's facial features lowered into a frown again as he took in her trembling body. The Jinchuriki stared at her. He could tell something was up, something he knew that only one thing could cure. After contemplating momentarily, he walked over slowly to her as she stood there making failed attempts at compassing herself. "Conan-chan," the blonde replied, getting Conan to raise her head and get a glimpse of him. Her eyes widened exponentially once she felt the blonde ninja wrap his arms around her, pulling her into him. It was one thing when he said those powerful words, but it was entirely another thing when it came to physical contact. There was only one other that could even get as far as the blonde did, but he passed away years ago. She would never let anyone else do something to her like this. Her instincts took over as she automatically retaliated his hug, trying to pry the boy off of her. "Let go me. You bastard, get your hands off of me." Her voice trembled while she began to punch him in the head with her hands, but that was proving to be useless as the boy held on for dear life. "You don't have to hold it in anymore, Conan-chan, let it go," the blonde murmured to the jonin who was still trying her best to rip herself free. "Let me go. Damn it, the blue-haired woman screamed as she began to lose herself. His comforting embrace was having an enormous effect on her, and no matter how badly she wanted to get away from him, she wanted to stay in his arms just as much. She craved it. She longed for it. She was hurting on the inside and pushed over the precipice. Something had to give. "Naruto, you, Ahaya." Her eyes closed tightly as her punches became less and less dangerous until they were nothing but light taps to his noggin. It wasn't long before all of her strength faded from hitting the boy and changed into her strength to embrace him back as tightly as she could. "Naruto, ooh." Her overflowing dam of tears finally broke forth as her emotional wall caved in. She finally began to sob uncontrollably onto him, dampening his shirt in the process, proving to be something that was long needed. Her crying spree was massive as all of that pent-up stress, anger, sadness, loneliness, grief, and scared feelings poured out onto Naruto's black shirt. There, Conan-chan," Naruto whispered soothingly into her ear, shifting his left hand to the back of her head and pushing her into his chest, while rubbing her hair calmly. "Everything will be okay." Naruto carefully moved the hug onto the couch as she continued wailing onto him. As it turned out, he was absolutely right about what she needed, and it was well-deserved just as he imagined it to be, although he got a little roughed up in the process. Everyone needed a hug like this eventually, even if they were an enemy bent on destroying other nations, so he let her cry, and cry to her heart's content. He wouldn't leave her until she was absolutely finished. Needless to say, that proved to be a while, because his ramen was never taken out of the microwave for the rest of the night.
End of chapter 7.